I, 28 AF, stood by the gift table, the white lace of my wedding dress brushing against the crisp linen tablecloth. My new husband, Liam, was across the room talking to his grandfather. For a moment, everything was perfect. The air smelled like roses and cake, and the low hum of happy conversation filled the reception hall. It was the day I had dreamed of, a bubble of joy I wished could last forever. Then my Aunt Clara approached, her smile tight and painted on, a familiar expression that always made the small hairs on my arms stand up. She was holding a small polished wooden box. It was dark cherry wood, simple and elegant, and I recognized it instantly. It had always sat on my mother's dresser. Aunt Clara pressed it into my hands. Her fingers were cold. "Your mother left this for your wedding day," she said, her voice a little too loud, drawing the attention of a few nearby guests. "She always said you were to open it when you were starting your new life." Tears pricked my eyes. My mother had passed away 3 years ago, and the ache of her absence was a constant, quiet companion. On a day like today, it was a sharp pain. Holding the box, I felt a wave of love and grief wash over me. I could almost feel my mother's presence, her warm hand on mine. I clutched the box to my chest, a sob catching in my throat. This was her way of being here with me. It was the most precious gift I could imagine. I looked up at my aunt, my vision blurry. "Thank you, Clara," I managed to say. "Thank you so much for keeping this safe for me." Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Of course, dear. Family takes care of family." I was about to ask Liam to come over to share this moment with me when a commotion started near the entrance of the hall. A man in a severe gray suit was speaking in a low, insistent tone to the wedding planner. He was tall and imposing, with a briefcase clutched in one hand. He looked completely out of place among the cheerful pastels and joyful faces of our guests. He pushed past the planner, his eyes scanning the room with a predatory focus. They landed on our little group by the gift table. Specifically, they landed on the wooden box in my hands. He strode toward us, his polished shoes clicking ominously on the dance floor. The happy chatter around us faltered as people turned to stare. Liam noticed something was wrong and started moving toward me, his expression shifting from relaxed to concerned. The man stopped directly in front of me and Aunt Clara. He didn't smile. He didn't offer a greeting. He simply pointed a long, bony finger at the box. "I am Arthur Davies," he announced, his voice carrying across the now silent room. "I am Ms. Clara Albright's legal counsel. That box is the subject of an ongoing estate settlement. You will hand it over to me immediately." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. My heart hammered against my ribs. I stared at him, then at my aunt, whose face had gone pale. Her painted-on smile had vanished, replaced by a look of nervous apprehension. The precious, intimate moment was shattered, replaced by a cold, public humiliation. A lawyer? At my wedding? Demanding a gift from my dead mother? "I don't understand," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I held the box tighter, as if he might physically snatch it from me. Mr. Davies' expression was one of cold impatience. "It is not for you to understand," he said dismissively. "It is for you to comply. The contents of that box are material to the final disposition of your mother's estate, which my client Clara is the executor of. It is not a personal gift. It is a legal asset." Liam reached my side, putting a protective arm around my shoulders. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice low and angry. "What is the meaning of this? You are interrupting our wedding." "A wedding does not supersede a legal directive," the lawyer snapped back, not even bothering to look at Liam. His eyes were fixed on me, on the box. "Hand it over, now, or we can have the authorities settle this." The threat hung in the air, ugly and obscene. The authorities. At my wedding. I looked at Aunt Clara, my mind reeling, searching for an explanation. She wouldn't meet my gaze. She just stared at a point on the floor somewhere behind the lawyer, wringing her hands. The silence from her was more damning than any confession. She had brought this man here. She had planned this. On my wedding day. The beautiful bubble of joy had popped, leaving behind something cold and sharp and full of poison. My mother's last gift had become a weapon, and my own aunt was the one pointing it at my heart. My initial shock began to curdle into a slow, burning anger. The tears I had felt for my mother were gone, replaced by a hot, dry feeling behind my eyes. I looked from the lawyer's stony face to my aunt's guilty one. She had waited for this moment. She had waited until I was at my most public, my most vulnerable, surrounded by everyone I loved to pull this stunt. She wanted to humiliate me. She wanted to assert her power. No, I said. The word was quiet, but it cut through the tense silence. Mr. Davies raised an eyebrow. I beg your pardon, he said. I said no, I repeated, my voice growing stronger. I stood up straighter, pulling away from Liam's supportive embrace just enough to face them head on. This was a gift from my mother. She left it for me. You are not taking it. Aunt Clara finally spoke, her voice trembling, playing the part of the victim perfectly. Elara, dear, please don't make a scene. Mr. Davies is just here to handle the formalities. It's all very complicated. We can sort it out later. A scene? I asked, my voice incredulous. You bring a lawyer to my wedding reception to confiscate a gift from my dead mother? And you're worried about me making a scene? The guests were murmuring now. I could feel their eyes on us, a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. My special day had been turned into a spectacle. Liam stepped forward, placing himself between me and the lawyer. You need to leave, he said, his voice firm. Right now. You can send us a letter or schedule a meeting for next week, but you are leaving this party now. Mr. Davies sneered. And if I don't? He challenged. Then I'll have you removed for trespassing, Liam said, his jaw tight. The lawyer seemed to consider this, his cold eyes flicking over to Clara. She gave a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of her head. He had made his point. He had disrupted the event, planted the seed of conflict, and asserted his client's claim. He didn't need to be physically thrown out. Very well, Mr. Davies said with a sniff of disdain. He handed a business card to Liam. I expect a call first thing Monday morning to arrange the handover of the asset. Failure to cooperate will result in immediate legal action. He gave me one last hard look, then turned on his heel and marched out of the hall as abruptly as he had entered. The moment he was gone, a wave of noise erupted as everyone started talking at once. The band, unsure of what to do, hesitantly started playing a soft melody. But the mood was broken. The joy had been siphoned out of the room. I turned to Aunt Clara, my hands shaking with rage. How could you? I whispered, my voice raw with betrayal. She immediately started crying, fat tears rolling down her carefully made-up cheeks. Oh, Elara, you don't understand, she sobbed, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. I was trying to protect you. Your mother, she wasn't always practical. That box is full of complicated old papers. I was just trying to spare you the headache on your wedding day. Her husband, my Uncle Robert, rushed to her side, wrapping a comforting arm around her. Now, Clara, he said soothingly. She's just overwrought. She doesn't mean it. He looked at me with disappointed eyes. Your aunt has done nothing but care for you since your mother passed. You should be ashamed of yourself speaking to her that way. I stared at them, a perfect, united front of gaslighting and manipulation. They were turning it around, making me the villain. I was the ungrateful niece, the hysterical bride. The lie was so blatant, so audacious, it left me speechless. I looked around for support, for anyone who could see through this charade. Liam was right beside me, his face a mask of fury. My best friend and maid of honor, Chloe, was pushing through the crowd toward me, her expression murderous. But many of the older family members were looking at me with uncertainty, their loyalty to Clara, the dutiful sister, wavering in the face of her public tears. I couldn't stay here. I couldn't pretend to cut the cake or have my first dance while this poison hung in the air. The perfect day was ruined, utterly and completely. Without another word, I grabbed Liam's hand. We're leaving, I said. Alara, wait, he said, his voice soft. It's our reception. It's over, I told him, my heart feeling like a block of ice in my chest. I held the wooden box tightly in my other hand. It was over the second she walked in with her lawyer. I pulled him toward the exit, ignoring the calls of my aunt and the confused stares of our guests. We walked out of the reception hall, away from the flowers and the music and the cake, and into the cool night air. The party was over, but the fight, I knew, had just begun. We drove home in near silence, the festive "just married" sign on the back of our car feeling like a cruel joke. I sat in the passenger seat, still in my wedding dress, clutching the wooden box on my lap. The weight of it felt immense, far heavier than its small size would suggest. It was no longer just a keepsake. It was a mystery, a battleground. Liam reached over and placed his hand on mine. Are you okay? He asked quietly. I shook my head, unable to form words. A single tear traced a path through my makeup. I wasn't okay. I felt violated. My wedding, a day that was supposed to be the happiest of my life, had been hijacked and turned into a public drama, and by my own family. When we got back to our small apartment, the celebratory balloons and bottle of champagne left by Chloe seemed to mock us. I walked straight to the bedroom, kicked off my shoes, and sat on the edge of the bed, the heavy satin of my dress pooling around me. Liam followed, his expression a mixture of anger and helplessness. I'm going to call my father, he said. He knows some lawyers. We'll figure out what this Davies character is all about. We'll fight this, Alara. I nodded numbly. She planned it, Liam. She waited until the reception, in front of everyone. She wanted them all to see her lay claim to it. She wanted to make it look like I was stealing something. She's a monster, he said, his voice tight. I never trusted her. The way she always talked down to you, disguised as concern. He was right. For years, Aunt Clara's brand of care had been suffocating. After my mom died, she had swooped in, ostensibly to help me manage things. Her help always felt more like control. She would go through my mother's things, sighing about what a mess it all was. She would offer financial advice that always seemed to benefit a family fund she managed. I had always brushed it off, telling myself she was just grieving in her own way, that her bossiness was a clumsy attempt at affection. Now I saw it for what it was. A long, calculated campaign to position herself as the true heir to my mother's legacy, with me as a difficult, ungrateful child. My fingers traced the smooth lid of the box. There was a small, simple brass latch holding it shut. My mother's last gift. What could possibly be inside that would make my aunt hire a lawyer and ambush me at my own wedding? Was it jewelry? Old family photos? Or was Clara right? Was it just a bunch of complicated papers she was twisting into something sinister? I have to open it, I said, my voice resolute. Liam sat down beside me. Are you sure you want to do that right now? Maybe we should wait until the morning. Or until we talk to a lawyer. No, I said firmly. I need to know. I need to know what she's so afraid of. My hands trembled as I lifted the small brass latch. It clicked open softly. I took a deep breath and slowly raised the lid. The box was lined with faded blue velvet. There was no treasure inside, no sparkling jewels or stacks of cash. Instead, there were two things. On top lay a simple, old-fashioned skeleton key, the kind used for a safe deposit box. It was tied with a faded silk ribbon. Beneath it was a thick, cream-colored envelope with my name, Alara, written on the front in my mother's elegant, familiar handwriting. My heart ached seeing her script. It was so her, so full of grace and strength. I picked up the envelope. It was sealed. This wasn't just a note, it was a formal letter. What is it? Liam asked, leaning closer. A key, I said, holding it up. And a letter. From my mom. I carefully broke the seal and unfolded the pages within. There were 3 of them, filled with her handwriting. I began to read aloud, my voice shaky at first, then growing stronger with every word. My dearest Alara, it began. If you are reading this, it means it is your wedding day. I am so sorry I cannot be there to see you, my beautiful girl, starting your new life. Know that I am with you in spirit, and my love for you is endless. I hope your heart is full of joy today. But I am writing this letter because I fear that joy may be short-lived. I have to warn you about your Aunt Clara. I paused, taking a ragged breath. Liam squeezed my hand. I continued reading. For years, I have trusted my sister. I loved her. But I was blind. Since your father passed, and especially since I got sick, Clara has been helping me with my finances. I gave her access to my accounts, trusting her completely. It was a mistake. A terrible, costly mistake. My mother went on to detail her growing suspicions. She wrote about money that had gone missing, small amounts at first, then larger sums. She described investments that had vanished, stocks that were sold without her knowledge. When she had confronted Clara, her sister had dismissed her concerns, blaming the market, or my mother's fuzzy memory due to her illness. She had gaslit her, just as she had tried to gaslight me tonight. She thinks I was a fool, my mother wrote, and I could feel the anger and hurt in her words. But I started keeping records, Alara. I have a ledger. I have copies of statements. I have proof. But I was too weak to fight her then. And I did not want our family's last days together to be filled with ugliness. So I made a plan to protect you. The letter explained everything. The key was for a safe deposit box at the downtown branch of the Citibank. Inside that box, my mother had placed her original will, the one that left everything she had directly to me. She had also placed the ledger detailing every dollar Clara had taken, along with signed IOUs my aunt had given her years ago for various loans she never repaid. Clara believes she is the executor of an older will, the letter concluded. A will I was pressured into signing when I was ill, one that gives her significant control over the estate. She will fight you for what she believes is hers. She will be cruel. She will try to make you look like the villain. Do not let her. The proof you need is in that box. That is my real gift to you, Alara. Not money, not jewels, but the truth. It is the only weapon you will need. Fight for it. Fight for yourself. All my love, Mom. I finished reading, and the pages fell into my lap. I was numb. It was so much worse than I had imagined. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a calculated, long-term theft. My aunt had been stealing from my sick mother for years, and now she had come to my wedding to try and steal the very evidence that could expose her. Liam let out a long, low whistle. Wow, he breathed. So that's it. She knows what's in the safe deposit box. Or at least she knows it's something that can ruin her. She doesn't want the box, I said, a cold, hard clarity settling over me. She wants the key. The humiliation and sadness I had felt earlier were now completely replaced by a white-hot, righteous anger. This was not just about money. It was about my mother's memory. Aunt Clara had preyed on her sister's weakness, abused her trust, and was now trying to tarnish her legacy. She had ruined my wedding, not out of some complicated legal necessity, but out of pure, greedy desperation. She was a cornered animal, and she had decided to lash out. I stood up, the heavy wedding dress suddenly feeling like armor. I looked at Liam, my eyes burning with a new resolve. She wants a fight, I said, my voice dangerously calm. She has no idea what she just started. The first thing we did the next morning was call Chloe. We needed a friend, but we also needed a witness, someone to ground us in the swirling madness. She came over immediately, still wearing the bridesmaid's dress from the night before, having clearly slept on someone's couch. She brought coffee and a righteous fury that matched my own. I swear, Alara, if I see that woman again, I will not be held responsible for my actions. She fumed as she paced our small living room. To do that to you? On your wedding day? It's diabolical. I showed her the letter. She read it in silence, her expression hardening with every line. When she finished, she looked up, her eyes wide. Oh, this is big, she said. This is really, really big. This isn't just a family squabble anymore. This is criminal. I know, I said, and I have the key to the proof. Liam had already been on his laptop looking up the bank's hours. The downtown branch opens at 9, he said. We should be there right when they open. Hold on, Chloe said, holding up a hand. Let's think this through. Clara and her greasy lawyer know you have the key. What do you think their next move is going to be? They'll try to stop me from getting to that box, I realized. They'll probably call the bank. Maybe they'll even try to claim the box as theirs. Exactly, Chloe said. You can't just walk in there. You need a plan. You need your own lawyer. Liam nodded in agreement. My dad gave me a name, a guy named Ben Carter. He specializes in estate law. He said he's a bulldog. I'll call him right now. While Liam was on the phone setting up an emergency consultation for later that afternoon, I decided to make my first move. I needed to test the waters to see how Clara would react. I took a deep breath and dialed her number. She answered on the second ring, her voice thick with false concern. Elara, dear, I've been so worried. Are you all right? She asked. I kept my voice cold and even. I want to know why you brought a lawyer to my wedding, Aunt Clara, I said, skipping the pleasantries. There was a pause. I already told you, darling, she said, her tone syrupy sweet. It was for your own good, to handle the legal complexities. Your mother's affairs were in a terrible state. My mother's letter seems to suggest otherwise, I said. The line went silent. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head as she processed what I had just said. The letter. She hadn't counted on a letter. Letter? She finally stammered. What letter? Elara, I think you must be confused. You were under a lot of stress yesterday. There is no confusion, I said, my voice like ice. I know what you've been doing, Clara. Mom knew? She wrote it all down. Her tone shifted instantly from fake concern to venom. You have no idea what you're talking about, she hissed. Your mother was a sick woman. She was delusional in her final years. You can't believe a word she wrote. So there is a letter, I said, trapping her. She sputtered for a moment. That's not what You are twisting my words. You're just like her, ungrateful and dramatic. I'm going to the bank, Aunt Clara, I said, deciding to drop the bomb and see where it landed. I'm going to open her safe deposit box. A sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. You can't, she said, her voice tight with panic. You don't have the authority. I am the executor of the estate. That box is legally under my control. I've already had my lawyer contact the bank. They will not let you in. So Chloe was right. She had already moved to block me. The confirmation sent a chill down my spine, but it also hardened my resolve. She was scared. Good. We'll see about that, I said, and hung up before she could respond. The conversation had told me everything I needed to know. She was desperate. She was lying, and she was actively working to stop me. The image of her tear-streaked face at the reception, playing the part of the grieving, concerned aunt, flashed in my mind. It was all an act, a performance for the benefit of the family she had been manipulating for years. She's already contacted the bank, I told Liam and Chloe as he got off the phone. She told them not to let me in. She's claiming she's the executor. Liam's jaw tightened. Well, our new lawyer, Ben Carter, is meeting us in an hour. He said to bring everything. The box, the key, the letter, everything. The meeting with Ben Carter was in a high-rise office building that felt a world away from our cozy apartment. Ben was a short, stocky man in his 50s with sharp, intelligent eyes and an air of no-nonsense competence. He listened intently as I recounted the events of the wedding and read him my mother's letter. He examined the key and the envelope, his expression grim. Your aunt and her lawyer Davies have made a colossal mistake, he said when I was finished. Publicly accosting you at your wedding? That's not just unprofessional, it's theatrical. It's a scare tactic. People who have the law on their side don't need to resort to such melodrama. He leaned forward, his hands clasped on his large oak desk. Their entire claim rests on an old will that they believe makes your aunt the executor. Your mother's letter states a new will exists in that safe deposit box. If that's true, and if that will is legally sound, it supersedes the old one. Your aunt's executorship becomes null and void, and her legal authority over that box evaporates. So we just need to get into the box, Liam said. Precisely, Ben agreed. But your aunt has already muddied the waters by contacting the bank. They're a conservative institution. Faced with conflicting claims, their default position will be to deny access to everyone until a court orders them to do otherwise. And a court order could take months. My heart sank. Months? Clara would use that time to hide assets, destroy records, and further poison the family against me. We don't have months, I said. I know, Ben said, a shrewd glint in his eye. Which is why we're not going to play their game. We're going to change the rules. He picked up his phone. I need to make a call. I know the head of legal at that bank. We're going to apply some professional pressure. For the next 20 minutes, we sat in his office while Ben worked the phone. He was polite but firm, citing legal statutes and banking regulations I didn't understand. He argued, he cajoled, he threatened litigation against the bank itself for failing to honor the rights of a potential beneficiary. He was, as Liam's father had promised, a bulldog. Finally, he hung up, a look of grim satisfaction on his face. Okay, he said. Here's the deal. The bank is nervous. They don't want to be sued. They have agreed to a compromise. They will allow you, me, your aunt, and her lawyer to be present for the opening of the box. A bank manager will officiate. Whatever is inside will be documented, and then we can fight over who it belongs to. My stomach twisted into a knot. I would have to see her again. So soon. I would have to stand in a small room with the woman who had stolen from my mother and ruined my wedding. When? I asked, my voice tight. Tomorrow morning, Ben said. 10 o'clock. I've already informed Davies. He was not happy about it, which tells me we're on the right track. They wanted to delay. They wanted to bury you in paperwork. They didn't expect you to fight back this hard, this fast. He looked at me, his expression serious. Tomorrow is going to be difficult. They will try to intimidate you. They will lie. They will put on a performance for the bank manager. You need to be prepared. Stay calm. Let me do the talking. And no matter what, do not let them get to you. I nodded, my mind racing. He was right. This was it. The first real confrontation. The opening of the box would be the moment the truth, whatever it was, would finally come to light. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. I felt a surge of adrenaline. My mother had left me a weapon. Tomorrow, I was finally going to use it. The next morning, I felt a strange sense of calm as Liam and I drove downtown. The anger and grief were still there, simmering beneath the surface, but they had been forged into a sharp, focused resolve. I chose my outfit carefully. A simple, dark blue dress. I wanted to look serious, composed and in control. I was not the hysterical bride from the wedding. I was my mother's daughter, here to finish the fight she had started. We met Ben in the lobby of the bank. He gave me a reassuring nod. Ready? He asked. As I'll ever be, I said. A few minutes later, Aunt Clara, Uncle Robert, and Mr. Davies arrived. Clara was dressed in black, as if she were in mourning, a stark contrast to the garish pink suit she had worn to the wedding. She had dark circles under her eyes, and her expression was pinched and sour. She refused to look at me. Uncle Robert just looked lost, his eyes darting around the marble lobby as if searching for an escape route. Mr. Davies, however, was all smug confidence. He strode over to Ben with his hand outstretched. Carter, he said with a tight smile. Fancy seeing you here. I assume you've advised your client of the serious legal jeopardy she's in by interfering with the execution of a will. Ben ignored his hand. Davies, he replied, his tone frosty. I've advised my client of her rights. Perhaps you should do the same for yours. Elder financial abuse carries some very stiff penalties. Davies's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. The shot had hit its mark. A bank manager, a prim woman named Ms. Evans, came out to greet us. Her face was a mask of professional neutrality, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. She was clearly not happy about being in the middle of a family war. "If you'll all follow me," she said. Her voice clipped. She led us through the main banking hall and down a short corridor to a heavy, formidable steel door. The vault. The air grew colder as she spun the large wheel and pulled the door open. Inside, the walls were lined from floor to ceiling with gleaming metal boxes of all sizes. The silence in the room was absolute. Miss Evans led us to a small private viewing room off to the side. It contained nothing but a plain wooden table and a few chairs. It felt sterile and unwelcoming. "The procedure will be as follows," she announced, addressing the room. "I will retrieve box number 412. The key holder will open the box in my presence. I will then inventory the contents, and copies of that inventory will be provided to both parties. The original contents will be placed back in the box until such time as a legal agreement or court order determines ownership." She looked at me. "Do you have the key, Ms. Miller?" I nodded, my hand going to the small purse where I had placed it. "She is not the key holder," Mr. Davies interrupted. "My client, as executor, is the legal controller of all estate assets, including this one. The key should be surrendered to her." "That matter is in dispute, which is why we are all here," Ben countered smoothly. "My client is in physical possession of the key left to her by the deceased. She will be the one to open it." Ms. Evans looked from one lawyer to the other, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Mr. Carter is correct. The person with the key opens the box. That is the bank's policy." She turned and left the room. A tense, suffocating silence descended. I could feel Clara's eyes on me now, burning with a hateful glare. I focused on a spot on the wall, refusing to give her the satisfaction of a reaction. Ms. Evans returned carrying a long, thin metal box. She placed it on the table with a soft thud. "Box 412. My mother's secrets." "Ms. Miller," she said, gesturing toward the box. My hands were shaking slightly as I stepped forward. I took the key from my purse. It felt cold and heavy in my palm. I inserted it into the lock. It turned with a satisfying click. I took a deep breath and lifted the lid. Inside, there was no mountain of paperwork. There were only 3 items: a thick, leather-bound ledger, a stack of folded documents tied with a ribbon, and a single, small, velvet-covered jewelry box. Ms. Evans, wearing white cotton gloves, carefully lifted each item out and placed it on the table. She opened the ledger first. The pages were filled with my mother's neat, precise handwriting. It was exactly as the letter had described: dates, amounts, and descriptions of transactions. A meticulous record of Clara's theft. Mr. Davies scoffed. "The ramblings of a sick woman. It proves nothing." Next, Ms. Evans untied the ribbon on the stack of documents. She unfolded the top one. Her neutral expression flickered for a moment. "This appears to be a last will and testament," she said, "for Eleanor Miller, dated 6 months prior to her passing. It is signed and notarized." Ben stepped forward. "May I?" he asked. Ms. Evans nodded. He scanned the document quickly, then looked up, a triumphant gleam in his eyes. "As we suspected," he said, his voice ringing with authority. "This will name my client, Elara Miller, as the sole beneficiary and sole executor of her mother's estate. It explicitly revokes all previous wills." A choked gasp came from Aunt Clara. Uncle Robert's face went white. Mr. Davies snatched the document from Ben's hand. He read it, his face growing darker with every word. "This is a forgery," he blustered, but his voice lacked conviction. It was clearly signed under duress. The woman was not of sound mind. "It is notarized, Davies," Ben said calmly. "The notary public testified to her soundness of mind at the time of signing. We can call him to testify in court if you'd like." I'm sure he'd be happy to describe how your client was actively trying to prevent him from meeting with her sister on the day this was signed. Davies was speechless. The foundation of their entire case had just crumbled to dust. Clara was not the executor. She had no legal claim to anything. But there was more. Ms. Evans picked up the next set of papers. They were the IOUs my mother had written about, each one signed by Clara in her loopy, dramatic script. Loans for a new car, for a kitchen remodel, for a vacation to Hawaii. It totaled over $50,000. Clara stared at her own signature as if she'd never seen it before. Those were gifts, she shrieked, her voice cracking. Eleanor was always so generous. She didn't expect me to pay her back. Then why did you sign a promissory note, Clara? I asked, my voice quiet. It was the first time I had spoken. She flinched as if I had slapped her. Finally, Ms. Evans opened the small velvet jewelry box. Inside, nestled on a bed of satin, was a simple, elegant locket, a silver heart. It was the one my mother wore every single day. Tears sprang to my eyes. This was the real gift, the personal gift. The rest was just business, the ugly machinery of a fight I had to win. But this was my mother's heart. The inventory was complete. The new will, the ledger, the IOUs. The proof was undeniable, laid out on the table for everyone to see. Clara's entire campaign of lies had been dismantled in a matter of minutes. She seemed to shrink before my eyes. The haughty, controlling woman was gone, replaced by a desperate, panicked fraud. She looked at her husband, then at her lawyer, searching for a lifeline. But there was none. Their smug confidence had evaporated, replaced by the stark terror of being caught. Mr. Davies cleared his throat, trying to regain some semblance of control. This is highly irregular, he stammered. We will, of course, be contesting the validity of these documents. You do that, Ben said with a shark-like smile. And we will be filing a countersuit for the recovery of misappropriated funds, and I'll be having a conversation with the district attorney's office about your client's activities. I'm sure they'll find that ledger very interesting reading. The threat of criminal charges hung in the air, thick and heavy. Uncle Robert looked like he was going to be sick. Clara finally broke. She rounded on me, her face a twisted mask of rage and despair. You did this, she screamed, pointing a trembling finger at me. You always had to have everything. She always loved you more. I was the one who was there for her. I was the one who took care of her day after day. I deserved it. I earned it. Her confession, raw and ugly, echoed in the small, silent room. It wasn't about need. It was about jealousy. It was about a lifetime of perceived slights and resentments that had festered into something monstrous. She hadn't stolen because she was in debt. She had stolen because she felt entitled. I didn't scream back. I didn't cry. I just looked at her. The woman who was my mother's sister, my own aunt, and felt nothing but a cold, empty pity. It's over, Clara, I said, my voice steady. She stared at me for a long moment, her chest heaving. Then she let out a strangled sob, turned and fled the room, with her husband and her useless lawyer scrambling after her. I was left standing in the silent vault with Liam and Ben, the evidence of her betrayal laid out on the table before me. I had won. The truth had come out. But it didn't feel like a victory. It just felt like the end of a long, sad story. I reached out and picked up the silver locket, closing my hand around it. It was still cold from the vault, but in my mind I could feel the warmth of my mother's love. She had given me everything I needed to protect myself. The fight was over, but now the real work of healing and of rebuilding my life without the shadow of my aunt's greed was about to begin. In the days that followed our visit to the bank, a strange and unsettling silence fell from my aunt's side of the family. There were no angry phone calls, no threatening letters from Mr. Davies. It was as if they had simply vanished off the face of the earth. Ben Carter assured me this was a good sign. They're panicking, he said over the phone. Davies is telling them how much trouble they're in, and they're trying to figure out a way to mitigate the damage. They know we have them cornered. He was right, of course, but the silence was unnerving. It felt like the quiet before a storm. I spent those days in a daze, caught between the relief of vindication and the profound sadness of my family's implosion. Liam was my rock. He handled everything, from fielding calls from concerned relatives to making sure I was eating. He canceled our honeymoon, a trip to Italy we had been planning for a year, without a second thought. "We'll go when you're ready," he said, wrapping me in a hug. "Right now we stay here. We finish this." The first crack in the silence came from my cousin, Maya, Clara's daughter. She called me late one night, her voice small and shaky. "Alara?" she whispered, as if afraid of being overheard. "Can you talk?" "Maya, is everything okay?" I asked, my heart rate quickening. "No," she said, and I could hear her start to cry. "Nothing is okay. Mom is..." "She's a mess. Dad, too. They're fighting all the time. They're talking about selling the house." My stomach churned with a complicated mix of pity and satisfaction. "What are they fighting about, Maya?" "The money," she sobbed. "The money from Grandma Eleanor's accounts. Dad had no idea how much she'd taken. He thought it was just a little bit here and there helping out. But he saw the ledger. Your lawyer sent a copy. He saw it all and he's horrified. So Uncle Robert wasn't a willing accomplice, just a weak-willed enabler. A man who preferred not to look too closely at things that might upset his comfortable life. It didn't excuse him, but it explained a lot. Mom keeps screaming that she did it for us, for our family," Maya continued, her voice thick with disgust. "She said she was building a nest egg, making sure we were secure. But it was all lies. She bought a new car last year. She redid the kitchen. She told Dad she got a big bonus at work. It was all your mother's money, wasn't it?" "Yes, Maya," I said softly. "It was." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "I'm so sorry, Alara," she finally whispered. "I had no idea. I'm so sorry." Her apology felt genuine, and it chipped away a tiny piece of the ice that had formed around my heart. She was a victim in this too, caught in the fallout of her mother's greed. "It's not your fault," I told her, and I meant it. "I have to go," she said abruptly. "I think I hear her coming. Just be careful, Alara. She's not thinking straight. She's blaming you for everything." The call left me shaken. Clara was unraveling, and in her desperation, she might be capable of anything. A few days later, Ben called with an update. "We've received an offer," he said, and I could hear the smirk in his voice. "Mr. Davies, on behalf of his client, has offered to repay 25% of the amount detailed in the ledger in exchange for you signing a non-disclosure agreement and dropping all further claims." I laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "He can't be serious." "Oh, he's serious," Ben said. "He's testing you, seeing if you'll take a quick, quiet payout to make this all go away. He's hoping you're tired of fighting." "Then he has severely misjudged me," I said, my voice hardening. "Tell him my counteroffer. 100% of the money stolen, as detailed in the ledger, plus reimbursement for all my legal fees, plus a written apology sent to every single guest who was at my wedding, retracting the lies she told about me. And she will never, ever contact me or my family again. If she agrees to that, I will consider not pressing criminal charges." There was a moment of appreciative silence on Ben's end. "I like it," he said. "It's aggressive. It's punitive. It's exactly what she deserves. I'll send it over right away." The next move was Clara's. I expected another lowball offer, more legal maneuvering. I did not expect her to show up at my front door. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I was working from home, trying to find some semblance of normalcy when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked through the peephole and my blood ran cold. It was Aunt Clara, standing on my doorstep, drenched and looking haggard. She was alone. My first instinct was to not open the door, to pretend I wasn't home. But Maya's warning echoed in my mind. She's not thinking straight. It was better to face her here, on my own terms, than to let her escalate. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and opened the door. She looked awful. Her hair was a mess, her makeup was smeared, and her eyes were red and swollen. The expensive coat she wore was soaked through. She looked like a ghost of the imperious woman who had ruined my wedding. "Elara," she said, her voice hoarse. "We need to talk." "I have nothing to say to you, Clara," I said, my hand firm on the doorknob. I did not invite her in. "Please," she begged, and the raw desperation in her voice was startling. "Just 5 minutes, please. Don't do this to me. Don't ruin my life." "You ruined your own life," I said coldly, "and you tried to ruin mine. You stood by and let your lawyer accuse me of theft at my own wedding. You've been stealing from my mother for years. You don't get to come here and play the victim." "You don't understand," she cried, tears starting to flow freely. "It wasn't like that. Your mother was so careless with money. I was just managing it, protecting it. I was going to give it all back." The lie was so pathetic, so transparent it was almost laughable. "You were managing it into a new kitchen and a BMW, Clara. You were protecting it in your own bank account. You're a thief, and worse, you're a liar." Her face hardened, the desperation momentarily replaced by the familiar flash of venom. "You were always her favorite," she spat. "She gave you everything. The best schools, the trips to Europe, the down payment on this apartment. What did I ever get? I was the one who stayed here, who took care of her when she was sick, who held her hand while she was dying. And what was my reward? Nothing. She left everything to her precious, perfect daughter who was never even here." The geyser of resentment that had been building for decades finally erupted. It was a torrent of jealousy, self-pity, and twisted logic. She had convinced herself that she was the wronged party, that she was owed my inheritance as compensation for a lifetime of feeling second best. "Taking care of her?" I asked, my voice dangerously low. "Is that what you call it? Or were you just waiting for her to die so you could get your hands on the rest of her money?" She slapped me. The sound cracked in the quiet hallway. My cheek stung, a sharp, bright pain. For a moment, I was too stunned to react. She had actually hit me. Then a cold, clear rage washed over me. All the pity I had felt for this pathetic, broken woman evaporated. I looked her dead in the eye. "Get out of my building, Clara," I said, my voice shaking with fury. "If you ever come near me or my husband again, I will not hesitate. I will call the police and I will press charges for assault, for harassment, and for every single dollar you stole. Do you understand me?" Fear finally seemed to penetrate her wall of self-pity. She saw something in my eyes she had never seen before. I wasn't the quiet, accommodating niece she could easily manipulate. I was my mother's daughter, and I was done being nice. She stumbled backward, her hand flying to her mouth. She looked at me one last time, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and hatred. Then she turned and practically ran down the hall. I slammed the door shut, my heart pounding in my chest. I leaned against it, my body trembling. I brought a hand up to my stinging cheek. The line had been crossed. There was no going back. Any thought I had of showing her mercy, of letting her off with just repaying the money, was gone. I wanted justice. For my mother, and for myself. I picked up my phone and called Ben. "The deal is off," I said, my voice hard as steel. "I want to press charges." The legal battle that followed was ugly and protracted, just as Clara had likely intended from the beginning. Her lawyer, Mr. Davies, used every trick in the book to delay and obstruct. He filed motion after motion, challenging the will's validity, questioning my mother's state of mind, and even trying to paint me as a gold-digging daughter who had manipulated her ailing mother into cutting her loving aunt out of the estate. It was a classic strategy of emotional and financial attrition. They hoped to wear me down, to make the process so expensive and so painful that I would eventually give up and accept a fraction of what I was owed just to make it stop. But they underestimated me. They underestimated my anger. And they underestimated my lawyer. Ben Carter was a bulldog, and he met every one of Davies's frivolous motions with a sharp, brutal counterattack. He buried them in discovery requests, demanding years of financial records from Clara and Robert. He deposed their friends, their neighbors, their accountant, slowly and methodically building a mountain of evidence that corroborated the story my mother's ledger told. The process was grueling. I had to sit in a sterile conference room for hours while Davies questioned me, his questions dripping with insinuation and contempt. He tried to twist my love for my mother into something calculating. "Isn't it true, Ms. Miller, that you visited your mother far more frequently in the months leading up to her death?" he would ask, his voice slick. "Yes," I would answer calmly. "She was dying. I wanted to spend as much time with her as I could." "Or were you there to unduly influence her, to poison her against the sister who had been her primary caregiver for years?" "I was there to comfort my mother," I would say, my voice steady, even as my hands clenched into fists under the table. "My aunt was there to write herself checks from my mother's bank account." The fight took its toll. It consumed my life, a constant, stressful background noise to my new marriage. There were days I felt like giving up, when the thought of seeing Clara's face or hearing Davies's voice one more time felt like more than I could bear. But then I would hold my mother's locket in my hand, or reread her letter, and my resolve would harden again. I was not just fighting for money. I was fighting for my mother's honor. The turning point came from an unexpected source: Uncle Robert. Throughout the proceedings, he had been a silent, miserable presence at his wife's side. But as the evidence mounted, as Ben laid out the undeniable proof of Clara's systematic theft, something in him began to crack. Ben deposed him, and for hours Robert dodged and weaved, claiming ignorance and a faulty memory. Then Ben produced a document Robert had never seen before. It was an email from my mother to her financial advisor, sent about a year before she died. In it, she expressed her concerns about Clara's handling of her funds and explicitly asked the advisor to stop allowing Clara to authorize trades on her account. The advisor had emailed back, confirming he had received the request, but the trades had continued. Ben then produced the trading authorizations for the subsequent months. They were all signed with a forgery of my mother's signature, a clumsy one. Ben pushed a copy across the table to Robert. "Your wife didn't just borrow money, Mr. Albright," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "She committed fraud. She committed forgery. These are serious felonies. And since you filed your taxes jointly, since the stolen funds were deposited into your shared accounts and used for your shared expenses, the state will consider you a co-conspirator. You are looking at jail time, Robert." The color drained from my uncle's face. He stared at the forged signatures, then looked at his wife, who was sitting at the other end of the table, her face a mask of defiant rage. For the first time, he seemed to see her not as his wife, but as the person who was about to drag him down with her. That night, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Ilara, it's Robert." His voice was thin and reedy, stripped of its usual bluster. I said nothing. I can't do this anymore," he said, his voice breaking. "I can't lie for her. Not anymore. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know how bad it was. I never would have. She told me your mother wanted her to have the money, that it was a gift." "Did you really believe that, Uncle Robert?" I asked, my voice cold. "Or was it just easier to believe it?" He was silent for a long moment. "It was easier," he finally admitted, his voice a hoarse whisper. "God help me, it was easier. He told me he was leaving her. He told me he would testify against her. He would tell the court everything he knew. He wasn't doing it to be a hero. He was doing it to save himself. But it didn't matter. His testimony would be the final nail in Clara's coffin. When Clara found out her husband was going to testify against her, she folded completely. The fight went out of her. Faced with the prospect of a public trial, of having her own husband detail her crimes on the witness stand, she instructed Davies to accept our original settlement offer. Ben called me with the news. She's agreed to everything, he said. Full repayment, all legal fees, the written apology, the no contact order. It's a complete and total surrender. I should have felt elated. I had won. On every single front. But I just felt tired. So incredibly tired. A week later, a certified letter arrived. It contained a cashier's check for the full amount Clara had stolen, down to the last penny. It also contained her letter of apology. It was a stiff, formal document, clearly written by her lawyer, admitting she had mishandled her sister's estate and expressing regret for the distress caused at my wedding. It was soulless and insincere, but it was a confession in writing. We made copies and sent one to every person who had been at our reception. The final piece of the settlement was the most important to me. The no contact order. A legally binding document that forbade her from ever speaking to me, writing to me, or coming near me again. It was a shield. A wall. A promise of peace. The aftermath was a slow and quiet rebuilding. My relationship with Maya, my cousin, began to heal. She had moved out of her parents' house and was trying to build her own life, free from the toxicity of her mother. She would call me sometimes just to talk. She told me her father had filed for divorce and that her mother was living alone in a small rented apartment, a shadow of her former self, ostracized by the family she had tried so hard to control. Liam and I finally took our honeymoon. We went to Italy, and for 2 weeks we didn't talk about lawyers or ledgers or lawsuits. We ate pasta and drank wine and walked through ancient streets. And for the first time since my wedding day, I felt the tight knot of anxiety in my chest begin to unwind. I was free. One evening, we were sitting on the balcony of our hotel room overlooking the moonlit sea. I was wearing my mother's locket. I opened it, something I rarely did. Inside, there were 2 tiny pictures. One was of my father, handsome and smiling. The other was of a much younger me, a gap-toothed kid with pigtails. It was a capsule of her love, the love she had fought to protect for me even after she was gone. Do you ever feel bad? Liam asked softly, reading my thoughts. About what happened to Clara. I thought about it for a long moment, watching the waves crash against the shore. I thought about the public humiliation, the broken marriage, the lonely apartment. I thought about the woman who had slapped me in the hallway of my own home. No, I said finally, my voice clear and steady. I don't feel bad for her. I feel sad that it had to happen. I feel sad for the aunt she could have been. But she made her choices. She chose greed over family. She chose lies over love. I closed the locket. The silver cool against my skin. My mother didn't just leave me an inheritance, I said, looking at my husband, my heart full of a quiet, hard-won peace. She left me a lesson. She taught me how to fight for myself. Clara never understood that. She thought my mother's kindness was a weakness. She finally learned what it feels like when that kindness runs out.